Hi there, welcome to this lecture. We spoke in great depth in the past two lectures about the query context of the search DSL. We'll now take a look at the filter context. And the filter context cannot be used exactly like the query, but it's very, very close. Okay, the kind of parameters that you can have in queries, the different kind of match queries that we were doing and using the should and must and bool, that's going to be very, very close in the filter query as well. So let's take a look at that. Now, if I just define the JSON structure and say filter, and then specify a simple match criteria, a match query, right? You'll recognize this syntax because it's very similar to how it was in the previous lesson. So let's say we want to search for those courses that have the name accounting, okay? If I just run this, it's not going to work. Let me hit play and notice it's a parsing exception. And you'll get the hint that it says unknown key for start object in filter. So it's not expecting this filter to be the first parameter that it sees in this JSON. It actually expects the query. So this will make it clear that everything in Elasticsearch falls within the query component or the query context. So we have to put the query there and wrap this filter inside of this query. Okay, so we're almost there. We're not 100% correct yet. This is still not valid DSL syntax. We have the filter, this match is correct, this query is correct, but except this filter, we can't just put it directly into the query. If I hit play, notice it's saying, no query is registered for filter. So this filter alone is not considered a query unless it's wrapped into something. What it needs to be wrapped in is something called a bool. So let's put that in here. We put the bool, and you've seen the bool query in the previous lesson. We could add the musts and the shoulds and so on. Well, filters also go into this thing called the bool, all right? And outside of this filter, we put the closing bracket for the bool. And let's just nest this further in so that's easier to read. So now this is a valid filter query, okay? Before Elasticsearch version 5, the filter needed to go into something called a filtered clause, but they changed it in Elasticsearch 5.0. It needs to go into this thing called a bool. And if we hit play, notice that this is going to return all of those documents that have the course name to be containing the word accounting. Okay, and you can go through this and you'll see. But one major distinction between the query or the filter is notice the document's scores, right? First of all, you'll see that there are 4 hits, so we got 4 documents returned, what we expect. The max score here is saying 0, so it's saying the document that is most relevant has a score of 0, and then when you look at the documents, the score is 0 for this one, score 0 for this one, score 0 for this one, and all of them. So this should tell you that the filter does not do relevancy scoring. It does not do relevancy scoring. The filter is primarily used for just filtering the documents that we need, just like sort of a database query without any inherent, relevancy or importance to the documents. That's one big difference between the query or the filter context. So right now here, this match is being done in the filter context. So this is, of course, not going to have the scoring of the documents, the relevancy scoring. The other difference is that filters are cached. So queries that we have already run, Elasticsearch is going to cache those. And that makes, obviously, searching faster, right? So filtering on a particular criteria, let's say, you only want to always ever, search for accounting. This filtered query for accounting is going to execute lightning fast, all right? It doesn't mean that the query is slow. If we just had a query with the match condition for accounting, doesn't mean that query is slow. It's just not going to be as fast as filter because the query takes a little bit of time to figure out the relevance, which document is more relevant than the other. Filter doesn't have to worry about it. It caches the query and things work faster using the filter. So if you don't care about relevancy scoring, if you don't care about which document is more relevant to your search criteria than another, always use the filter. okay? And you can pretty much do everything in the filter that you can do in a query. So for example, inside of this filter, I can have a must and should and so on. It's going to behave slightly differently, but it's the same kind of syntax, and it'll require you to do some experimentation to figure it out. So if we have a bool inside of here, right, I can have a bool. So inside of here, we have a bool query, and make sure you put a comma, and I can further only get those courses that are taught, for example, by Bill. Okay, we have Thomas, and these are the two instructors, I think, but we only want to get courses taught by Bill. So if we want to filter for Bill, we could just put that in the bool. And of course, the bool has musts and shoulds. I can't just put this match directly in the bool, right? The bools should have musts and shoulds. Let's try that. Let me take this and paste it here and change this to be professor.name, and then give the name for, let's say we only want Bill. If I do this and hit play, it's not going to work, all right? You can't just have a match within a bool. We need to have it inside of a must or a should or a must not, for example. So let's do that. We put it into this must, and we specify the criteria that we want to must. Okay, and so we could just cut this out and paste it within the must, like that. And of course, this is an array. So array of what? We need to specify array of what? This is an array, is supposed to be an array of JSON. So this alone is not JSON. We need to make sure we have the opening bracket there and the closing bracket here. Okay, so now this is valid JSON. Everything needs to be valid JSON in this when we're working with JSON, of course, especially for this DSL. So let's hit play, and it looks like we've got a problem here. So we have this must condition, right, within this filter. The problem is that it doesn't know if this is a must or a should or what is this, right? We have a specific must within this bool that's inside of this filter, right? But this guy, outstanding, doesn't really know how important this is in terms of querying. So it doesn't work. We need to put this inside of the must if we want, or inside of something else. So let's put this, take that away from the filter. Since we have a bool now, we must have musts and shoulds inside of this bool. So we have this must. I can add in the other condition, this match condition here. And so now both of these conditions will be essentially must. And we don't need this comma at the end because that's the end of the list of the matches inside of the must. Okay, so let's hit play. And there we go. This is going to give us all of those professors that are Bill, right? So there are two courses that Bill teaches and that are accounting. So accounting also needs to be there. And again, look at the max score here. No document was considered relevant. They were all equally relevant when it comes to a filter. Filter is just used to specifically query like this. And so since we have a must, we can also have a must not, just like in a query. So let's do that, must not. And inside of this must not, I can specify a criteria. For example, it must not be, E7. The room should not be E7. We only want room E3. That's a good criteria. So let's try that. Inside of the match condition, we specify the criteria for room should be E7. It cannot be E7, for example. So we'll only get this first record up here. Okay. So let's hit play. And there we go. We only get one document. And this is the guy that we get back. All right. So notice we have a filter. A filter we can't use just like that. We need to put it inside of a query. Everything in Elasticsearch goes inside of this query parameter. And for filters, we need to also put a bool around it. Okay. Now, can you think of another way for us to enforce that the document should have room E3? Instead of having this must not, let me remove that from inside of the filter. We can actually put the must not or must outside of this filter. We're still inside of this bool, right? So this is where the filter ends. So if we put a comma and we put a must here, this is still valid, right? Now, guess what? Are we in the filter context at this point? We are not in the filter context here, okay? Double click here and notice the filter ends here. So this is the stuff that's not scored, but this out here is the query context. So we can expect the result of this must execution to be scored a relevancy, all right? So I can say must match the room should be E3. Right? Instead of doing must not for E7, I'm just specifically saying the room should be, must be E3. So let's hit play. And there we go. Right? This is that room, E3. The professor is Bill. The name of the subject is accounting. And notice that this document is scored. Right? Take a look at the score. So there's a relevancy thing going on here. Because this must, right, is not within the filter context. It's within the query context. Okay? This bool is within the query context, but anything that goes into the filter is not scored. Right? That's the only reason we would ever use a filter, is to just quickly get only those documents that we care about without the need for relevancy. So we filter only the professor Bill, the course name accounting. We don't care how that's sorted, but we do care about the result of this. This is the most relevant that we are interested in. So this is going to be scored. It's going to be given a relevancy score because this is in the query context, not the filter context. Okay, it could be confusing to understand, but again, you have to practice and change these things up and make sure that you're getting enough practice as I'm explaining it to you. So to be a bit more generous so that we get more documents back, instead of having this match professor name and match the accounting subject, I can just get rid of these match conditions and have a range query, right? Whatever can go into a query can go into a filter as well. So let's just specify a range query, and that should be inside of a JSON object. And we could say, range, and then we specify the field. So we could say students enrolled, and then we need the greater than and less than parameters. So we could just do GTE greater than or equal to, let's just say 19. Greater than or equal to 19. And this is in the must of the filter. So this aspect of the documents that are returned are not going to be given a relevancy score. So let's hit play. And there we go. We get a total of 2 documents. This has 19 students and this has 27 students. So just to include more documents, I'm going to move this number back to, for example, 12. So there we go. This gives us all 3 courses that are taught in E3. Okay, this accounting course and this capital markets course and this accounting course is all taught in room E3. Now, to be more generous, let's just say that this should be a should. It would be nice to have the room in E3. So let's hit play. And there we go. We get all 10 documents. All right. So notice that E3 here is ranked above everything else, right? Because we're saying, hey, it would be nice to have the room be E3. And so it's showing me those rooms first. And notice it has a score for those 4 or so rooms, 4 or so courses. So this one has a score, and then going down, this one does not have a score. Okay. This is just matching the criteria of students enrolled being greater than or equal to 12, right? So is all of these rest of the documents here. They don't have a score because they're not based on this condition. Only the documents that are based on this condition that are in the query context, right, are going to have a score, a relevancy score. Now, if we want to get more specific, we can put a range in here as well. So let me just copy this guy right here. Take this and put it inside of the should. So just make sure you have your different brackets correctly placed, okay? If it doesn't show an error, then you've bracketed it correctly. So notice this range should be a JSON object itself, just like this match is a JSON object. Put a comma because this should is an array. It can contain multiple JSONs. So the first JSON is right here. The second JSON object is this one, the range guy. And here, let's just say that if the student enrolled is greater than or equal to, let's just pick a number here, 19. Or let's just try something different. Let's try 13. If it's greater than or equal to 13, and just to be more specific, let me also do less than or equal to 14. All right, and that's going to just target this 13, 14 range, and that should just leave us with this one document right here. To be on the top of the list. All the documents are still going to show, but the one that is going to be most relevant according to the should clause is going to be that document that is taught in E3, as well as is greater than or equal to 13 and less than or equal to 14. So let's hit play. And there we go. This document with the student enrollment to be 13 that's taught in Room 3 is the most relevant out of this entire list of documents, okay? Because both of these should clauses are matching. So that is why the score here for this document is the highest. This is the most relevant. So the key to this lesson is understand that the filter context, whatever queries that we put into the filter context, those queries are not going to be impacting the relevancy score of the documents, okay? They're not going to be returned with a relevancy score. It's just going to return those documents that match. Anything in the query context does have a relevancy score associated with the documents that are returned, all right? And part of this bool, right, this bool can contain musts and shoulds and so on, so as well as the filter. We can't just put filter directly in the query. We need to put a bool around it. And inside of the bool, we have the filter, which is not going to have the relevancy score. And then we have the should, which is going to have the relevancy score. Now, you may have gotten sick of me saying what is scored and what is not as part of this query, right? I've repeated it so many different times that the filter is not given a relevancy score, whereas the components of the query that are outside of this filter are given a relevancy score, right? So sorry for repeating it so many times, but this is an important concept, and you'll run into this issue where you're trying to match a document based on relevancy score, and it doesn't seem to match as well as you'd like, right? There's some other document that is having a higher relevancy score, and you're not able to figure out why. So it often requires digging a little deeper into the query and changing some attributes around to make it work, all right? It's a sort of a trial and error process with Elasticsearch or any search engine, really. For example, Google, that's a search engine. They keep altering or changing their search algorithms, and that has actually affected economies because they, change their search algorithm. So you're going to probably be doing that with Elasticsearch, maybe trying different fields to match and, changing the query a little bit. But that just comes with practice. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And one thing I forgot to mention is some of the components of the query that we were discussing in the previous lecture. We can use those right in this query, right in this large query that contains a filter as well as a regular should. And if I wanted to add for example, a multi-match, where we're matching a value against two fields, we can add that to this. So let me just put a comma here. So I can just add that multi-match query right after this range. So we got a match, we got a range, and then after the range we have a comma, and then this is the multi-match query that we have. So this is going to check for whether market exists in either the name field or the course description field or both, okay? If it's both, then that of course is going to have a higher relevance compared to everything else, but you can actually alter the relevance score that's assigned to the document based on which fields you consider more important, and that's called field boosting. But anyway, let's run this query to see what the result is, and nothing much changes, right? Because students enrolled and room E3, these E3 and students enrolled is 13. This multi-match would be nice to have, but let's boost the course description with a caret. All you need to do is put a caret after the field name and then specify how much you want to boost it. So this is sort of an arbitrary number. You'll have to experiment with it, but let's try the number 2. So we're boosting it by a factor of 2. So let's hit play and notice that the result changed a little bit. All right, notice that the course description here contains the word market. So the word market is going to be searched in both the name field as well as the course description field. But if it's found in the course description field, we're going to give it a boost of 2, meaning, give it more importance. So now notice the max score for this document. This document is not even taught in E3, right? This classroom is not taught in E3. The number of students is not even between 13 and 14, right? These are all nice to haves because they are in the should clause, right? This is nice to have, this is nice to have, and this is nice to have. But we're giving a lot of importance to this course description field by raising it using this caret with a factor of 2. And, we can increase this to, 5 or 500. This is sort of an arbitrary number. Usually, 2 or 3 or just 1 is often going to make a big difference. So let's just leave it to 2 and notice that, this is that document. It's been boosted based on this field. Just for fun, let's change this to 200, okay? And hit play. And of course, this is still going to be boosted to the top, of course, right? Doesn't make a difference. If 2 is enough, 200 would be way more than enough, right? Let's try 1. Let's hit play. The top document now is different, okay? Notice the students enrolled is 13 and the room is E3. So this boosting of 1 doesn't really make much of a difference. The word market is not inside of the description. That document has been pushed down somewhere, which is right here, right? Room E4. It contains the word market right here, but it's not as important as the other 2 criteria. So this boosting of 1 was not enough. If we put it to 2, that's what's going to bring this Marketing 101 course up to the top. Let's hit play, and there goes Marketing 101. This description contains the word market, so it's given more of a boost, right? So this is called field boosting. You can boost individual fields, right? So just that extra little note there of field boosting, that's another thing you want to keep in mind. So a lot of content was discussed in this lesson as well as the last couple of lessons. So make sure you take your time to practice these concepts, play around with these queries. It's all about the practice. And sorry for repeating so much in this lesson, but I think it was crucial for you to thoroughly understand this topic of what gets scored in a query and what doesn't. Query components that are within the filter context are not going to be scored, and they are going to be cached, okay? So filters are always going to be faster. Think of them like a database query. When you want to filter for something specific, you put that into the filter clause. You don't care about its relevance. But anything that is within the query context is always going to be taking into consideration relevancy scoring. Hence, queries are going to be slightly slower than filters. And also syntax-wise, the filter is very similar to the query. The kind of query components that can go into the query context are going to be the same kind of components that can go into a filter, right? We spoke about the exists query. We spoke about the match. We spoke about match all. We spoke about multi-match. These are the different kind of query components that you can put into the query context, but you can also put these into the filter context, okay? And, we talked about the famous bool. Bool is very important when you have musts and shoulds and must not. That's how we can use the and or logic to further build up our queries. And that bool could be in the query context as well as the filter context, and it'll work exactly the same. So in general, I would say that if you want to do exact matches and you don't care about the relevance, you just use the filter query. That's going to always be 99.9% of the time faster than the query context. But if you care about relevancy scoring and you're doing full text search, you want to be using the query context for those sort of query components. Okay, so that's enough information for now. Let's wrap up this lecture. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.